Intellectual property. Certainly a hot topic right now. Many internet creators have made videos expressing their frustrations with the IP system, mainly because big media empires like Sony and Disney abuse the fuck out of intellectual property. Contrary to what you may think, most libertarians, like myself, are actually against the very concept of IP. It's a pretty curious case considering many people have this idea that libertarians are all greedy capitalists. So how could someone in favor of capitalism be against one of its major pillars? Well, it's a long story, but the short answer is intellectual property simply doesn't exist. Private property is a real thing that you can hold in your hands, but more importantly, private property is scarce, whereas intellectual property is just a thought or an idea, and you can't really claim ownership to an idea. This video will be directed towards people who are still in favor of intellectual property, and I'll be using the Japanese video game franchise Touhou to explain why most of the pro-IP claims are wrong. So first, a bit of background. What is Touhou? Touhou is a Japanese video game franchise of bullet hell games. It was started in 1997 by one person simply known as Zun. Zun is the mastermind behind the whole franchise. He does everything: the character designs, the graphics, the programming, the story, and even the music. As of right now, there are a total of 31 official games that have been released all throughout the years, though only 18 of them are mainline games, with the other ones being spin-offs. So Touhou is a one-man project, yet it almost feels like it's owned by a huge million-dollar video game company. Over the years, the franchise has just continued to grow in popularity. It's extremely popular in Japan, but it is also extremely popular with weebs here in the West. But how? How did this man do it? Well, the answer is, he had help. His fans. Let me explain. See, unlike certain companies, Zun is not hostile to fan content. On the contrary, Zun is very supportive of it. In fact, Zun is so liberal with his franchise that he even allows people to make money out of fan content. That is pretty unusual. Like, imagine if Nintendo allowed the creators of the Mario 64 Plus Unity port to sell it and make money out of it. Obviously, this would never happen with Nintendo IPs, but something like that is very possible with the Touhou franchise. If you go to Steam or the PlayStation Store or even the Nintendo eShop, you will find tons of Touhou games. But most of them aren't even official. They are fan games made by small teams of people. They make money using characters they didn't create, and they are allowed to do this by the creator. And it's not just video games either. It's also manga, music videos, trading cards, and even unofficial anime. Yeah, the Touhou franchise has everything every good franchise needs. How does this relate to intellectual property exactly? Well, one of the major pro-IP claims is that if it wasn't for IP laws, anyone could just come and steal your creation, making money out of it, and you won't be able to make any money yourself. However, Touhou shows us that's clearly not the case. Zun isn't poor or homeless. He didn't lose any money because people stole his work. Fan projects using his character didn't harm his income. On the contrary, it did the exact opposite. It's pretty safe to say that Touhou wouldn't be anywhere near as big as it is now if Zun had taken a more hostile approach to fan content. All of the fan content inevitably leads people to the Touhou franchise, which leads to more people buying his video games. The second point pro-IP people tend to make is, if you don't protect your IP with IP laws, people won't know that you were the creator of your IP. So someone could theoretically try to claim that they are the creator of your work and take all the credit for themselves. Without the government to set the record straight, how will you prove you were the creator? Well, once again, the Touhou franchise completely tears down this argument. The first time I ever heard about Touhou was because people on 4chan were spamming pictures of Cherno. I got curious as to who this character was, and a quick Google search eventually led me straight to the Touhou wiki. And the very first thing it says about its creator is, Team Shanghai Alice is a Japanese doujinshi game developer group that specializes in shoot 'em up, consisted by one man called Zun. Was the government needed to set the record straight? No. The government didn't do shit to point me to the creator of the franchise. The internet did. Or more specifically, the fans did. If anybody else tried to claim they were the creator of Touhou, we would all know that person is full of shit. So this use case for IP loss has once again been proven to be false. Now I want to move on to the last point, and that's you need IP loss to protect your IP from harmful content that may damage the image of your IP. An example of this being, Nintendo markets itself towards children, and because of that, they obviously wouldn't be too happy if a porno movie featuring Mario characters was created. Which is ironic because there actually is one, but that's besides the point. So how does this point fare against the Touhou franchise? Well, yes, it's true that there is some not so decent Touhou content out there. To say that this content harms the IP, or that anybody would blame this content on Zun, is absolutely ridiculous. Nobody stumbles upon a Touhou rape dojin and thinks Zun had anything to do with it. We all know that content was made by third parties, completely uninvolved with Zun. It doesn't really ruin the franchise as a whole. Like, I seriously doubt anyone out there considered themselves a fan of the games, then decided to stop playing them after stumbling upon some vor hentai or something. And even then, IP laws don't really stop this kind of content. Sonic is an IP owned by Sega, protected under the same IP laws as every other big video game franchise. But we all know about the sea of degenerate Sonic content that exists on the internet. IP laws haven't done shit to stop fetish hentai artists from using Sonic in their work. And even if they did, that content doesn't harm the IP itself. Lastly, I just want to talk about how Zun's way of managing his franchise stacks up to the competition. Zun, whether intentionally or not, has created what I think is a very ideal model for a franchise. Most media franchises are a monopoly. They are tightly controlled by a media company, which itself is usually controlled by a much larger media company. Any content that comes out for this franchise either comes directly from this company or was licensed to a third party, completely leaving out anyone the media company doesn't approve of. While the company's excuse will be, this is to ensure the quality of their product stays consistent. It usually just leads to franchises losing their appeal over time. It's sort of become an accepted fact that every franchise has an expiration date. A franchise starts off amazing when the creators have almost full creative freedom, but as time goes on, the newer installments all feel inferior to what came before, and then the franchise just dies. The company gives up on it and no one else is allowed to make content with that franchise ever again. The Touhou franchise, though, is completely different from this model. Even if and when Zun eventually does retire, Touhou will never die. The fans will continue to be there and will continue to make content until the sun explodes. In this way, the Touhou franchise almost feels like it's decentralized. It's like if you took anarcho-capitalism and converted it into a model for a franchise. There are literal small teams of people whose entire business is creating Touhou content. Even if any one of these parties stops producing content, there will be other parties to take its place, making the Touhou franchise one of the biggest video game franchises of all time, all without the amount of money and work it takes for more centralized franchises to have the same amount of content.